David, first of all, it's great to be back on your show as always. You're right. There's a very dangerous elixir out there right now. There's a combination of Iran, China, North Korea, Russia, and instability of the U.S. political system that are major threats to our security. And the latter, in my opinion, is perhaps the greatest threat by a long shot. You know, one side of the aisle is looking at weaponizing the legal system, and then the other side responds by weaponizing the legal system. Now, it's much more severe on one side than the other, but the reality is our political system is something that is at danger. But looking at Iran, China, North Korea, Russia, those major threats going on right now, and you have over 20 combat events going on around the globe right now, there's some major concern. For example, in this year alone, Russia, North Korea, and Iran have boosted their capabilities, and they are now doing exercises together in the Middle East. They're doing war at sea exercises with over 20 other vessels, and that's a major deal. If you want to start looking at NATO spending, I think you need to start by saying, are individual countries prepared to pay for the defense of their own nation and their own people? And if the answer is yes, that they think that's important enough to be able to defend their own country at times like this when things are getting pretty dangerous and potentially you have a Russia that wants to expand significantly, you have Azerbaijan and Armenia going back and forth, and around the globe lots of these issues going on, then the answer is probably yes, they would want to do that. If their answer is that they expect the United States to constantly fund the weapons, their personnel, train their personnel, etc., I'm not saying help, but I'm saying significantly fund, then that's a question really that we have to look at as a U.S. taxpayer. And if you just look today at Article 23, it was just passed by China. That's a major deal. I mean, that now is saying that Article 23 basically says it punishes offenses including treason, sabotage, sedition, the theft of sale of secrets, external interference, espionage, with sentences up to life in prison. And so now what you have are business people going to Hong Kong or business people going to other parts of China, and now they feel very uncomfortable with the likelihood that they could end up in prison for the rest of their life because China does not like the way they're doing business. Here's another relationship here. We're dealing with the Iranians in numerous ways right now, and one of those is through the Houthi rebels. Of course, we're dealing with them as well with the Israelis and on the ground. But then when you talk about the Houthis, the reality is that we are up almost 250% in cost to ship a single container through that region of the world right now, which means the costs of everything coming into the United States and other parts of the globe are increasing because of the actions that Iran is undertaking. Yeah, JCPOA was a disaster for sure. I mean, where that money went, just follow the dollar bills on how we got to the point where where Hamas and the Houthis are funded so significantly that they can do what they're doing today. I think you ask a specific question of what actions can be taken. I think action number one by a long shot is we need to clean up our own political system internally here. We have got to get this better. We cannot have the far right, the far left, and nothing in between that are just fighting constantly. You have to believe that the vast majority of citizens in this country believe the same thing. They believe in national security. They believe in cleaning up the environment where it can be cleaned up. They believe in health care. 100% they see it as an opportunity. David, one of the first interviews you and I did many years ago, we talked about the fact that we had an opportunity to build Russia as as an ally, at least not as an enemy. And we were heading down that road for quite a while. After the fall of the wall, we started working. It was Americans that went over and helped them write their constitution. It was Americans that went over and helped them start building a capital market. There were a lot of good things happening there early on, and then we kind of forgot about them. And then our relationship became just an assumption that that was going to move ahead in the direction that we wanted to move it into. And I think that was a huge mistake many years ago when we allowed this to happen. Because I do think that the world will be a very different place if you had a U.S.-Russian alliance. And he communicates pretty clearly with us. He communicated extremely clearly before going to Ukraine, and the right actions weren't taken. That war could have been prevented. 100% it could have been prevented. He communicated clearly what he was doing. He moved troops up there, then he moved aircraft up there, and he's like, no kidding, I'm really going to go now. And nothing was done about it. He has not used nuclear weapons, and he has said, and it's a little frightening, that he would consider using them. He has moved them around now outside his own borders. He has not followed the Budapest Agreement in any way, shape, or form, but he's still, to some degree anyway, we understand where he would go next. Who comes in behind him with all those weapons and with all those troubles they have is another issue completely. I think action number one by a long shot is we need to clean up our own political system internally here. We have got to get this better. We cannot have the far right, the far left, and nothing in between that are just fighting constantly. You have to believe that the vast majority of citizens in this country believe the same thing. They believe in national security. They believe in cleaning up the environment where it can be cleaned up. They believe in health care, all those things. And yet, if you have a vast number of people and you don't know who they are or what they have as they come across the country, not just weapons, etc., but you end up with situations like we have today where the Center for Disease Control and Prevention just reported that measles outbreaks are blowing up in the United States right now. They're up dramatically from just 2 years ago. And you have to believe that there are other diseases out there that will continue with that. You know, probably you have the Israelis who are scratching their head right now. You know, is the U.S. with us or is the U.S. not with us? They've always said they'd be with us. There is a reality that when you look at Israel, you really have to be looking at China. And I say that because we have made it very clear as a nation that we will never let Israel fall. And if we do let Israel fall, or we do not support Israel significantly, then are we not saying that our word with Taiwan is not the same? And I think this is something that Chinese and the rest of the globe is looking at very carefully right now on whether or not we're starting to waffle on Israel, and whether or not we will then waffle on Taiwan as well.